My name's Chris Mabry. If those of you who haven't met me yet, I'm the new general manager here at PreSales Collective. I was a member of PreSales Collective. I was a leader in solution consulting. Um, I was an ambassador last year and answered the call whenever Sean and James reached out. And I'm thrilled to have Chris on with us today. Chris White and I became friends like over 2 years ago now. I was on Chris White's LinkedIn Live um, as an individual contributor. And it was just like, it was one of these moments where I just reached out to somebody who I thought was putting out good content. And I said, man, I'd love to chat with you. I want to learn about how you're doing this. I like the book. Um, and so this is a personal favorite of mine because we are friends and we know each other. We've kept up the speed. I've hired Chris at a sales kickoff at our previous company I was at for the training. And I'm grateful for Reprise being able to help us put this on today. So a big shout out to them. Courtney, the whole team there is awesome. And so, I'm here to learn with you, Chris. I'm excited about the content that you've put together. I know that we talked about 5, but I understand that we've had to compress this down. So
You're still a little bit of my thunder there, Chris. That's all right.
yeah, so I want to let you take it away. Thank you. Welcome everyone, and please make this as interactive as possible in the chat. Let's all walk away with a few really good nuggets we can use in our day-to-day lives. So I'll hand it over to you, Chris.
Super. Thank you so much, Chris. And I will begin by first thanking Reprise as well for including me or inviting me to participate in this. And of course, Chris, I'll thank you and PreSales Collective for giving me this opportunity. And thank you, those of you who decided to join us for 30 or 40 minutes to hear a few ideas that I'm happy to share. So as Chris said, happy to take any comments or questions in the chat. I have some very tangible and very specific thoughts and models that I'm going to share over the next 30 or 40 minutes that I hope you'll find valuable. So with that, let's go ahead and drop into the prepared material. This is a conversation around being effective versus efficient. And yes, I think when we first we're talking about doing this, we came up with 5 things that we thought we could talk about. And in preparing for it, I realized that I had way too much material to cover in a webinar. So we're going to sort of narrow it down to 3. But as I said, we're gonna make it very valuable, and the things we're going to share, I hope you'll find useful. Now, before I do that, if you've ever heard me speak at any events or even any of these online sessions, I love to use this Menti platform for taking polls. So I'm going to invite all of you to go ahead and get out your QR code, scan the QR code so you can participate in this poll. And Chris, was the link put in the chat? I'm going to go ahead and drop the link in the chat as well.
Yeah, go ahead and drop it in there.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and drop that in there as well. So folks, if you prefer to just pop up a browser, you can click the link in the chat. If you care to use your phone, go ahead and use your phone. I'm going to pause the screen just for a moment. We'll leave that QR code up. I see some people are joining. If you have joined, you're going to see the first question. The first question is, what best describes your role? What best describes your role? Pre-sales leader, pre-sales IC, meaning individual contributor, in case that's not obvious, sales leader, account executive, or other. And I have frozen the screen for a moment. I'm starting to see the answers come in. I'll share with all of you what I'm seeing here in just a moment. So let's see, we've got about 25 responses so far, which is a little more than half. By the way, the numbers are starting to increase. That's fabulous. So allow me to go ahead and share what I'm seeing. So this is pretty, I guess we shouldn't be shocked by this, Chris, but this is a pre-sales crowd. We've got a little more than half that have at least responded are pre-sales leaders, which is fantastic. It's probably about what we would have expected. And we do have some individual contributors with us as well. So I'd love to see that. All right, next question. How long have you been in pre-sales? How long have you been in pre-sales? Always curious to understand the seniority and the tenure of the group that we have. All right, so we've got a few folks that are All right. So we've got one person, 20 plus years. If you feel comfortable, the individual who typed in 20 plus years, do you mind identifying yourself in the chat and take credit? Chris always teases me because I always carry poker chips around with me. There it is. I'm tossing a poker chip. Brian Davidson. All right, Brian Davidson. You get the first chip. Dave Gachonis. I hope I'm saying that. Fabulous. Dave, I'll toss you a chip as well. We got quite a few folks in the 10 to 20 year range. We got folks in the 5 to 10 and 2 to 5. And a few of you have been in the profession for just a few years. So fabulous. Well, folks, welcome. Thank you for being here. By the way, Dave, if anything happens to me here in the next 30 minutes, Dave could probably give this talk for me. So Chris, you might want to have the trigger finger ready. You may have to add him as a panelist. All right. One final question. What do you find most difficult? Being highly effective, operating with efficiency, balancing the two, or all of the above? All right. It looks like we're leaning sort of where I thought we might lean, balancing the two and all of the above. Excellent. Okay. And folks, I love this conversation for a couple of reasons. First is, and some of you may be familiar with the book that I published. I published a book called The 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers about 4.5 years ago. And so certainly being effective in our role is near and dear to my heart. But we also need to be highly efficient, something that I discovered about myself relatively early or sort of mid-career as a pre-sales professional. Nicole, thank you for the comment, by the way. I'll toss you a chip for that, Nicole. That's always chip worthy when somebody says something nice about the book. What I discovered about myself about 2 or 3 years into my career as a pre-sales professional is that I was becoming very, very effective. But I realized that at times I was doing that at the expense of being as efficient as I needed to be. And so that's really where this topic has been evolving, frankly, over a couple of decades. Now, I was at the Demo Fest in New York City. Chris, you were there probably a month or two ago. And I gave a talk on if being effective and efficient from an IC perspective. Today, we're going to talk more from a leader perspective. And now is the time of year, right? Many of us are coming up to the end of the fiscal year. We're starting to plan for the next fiscal year. Now is the time to start having these conversations. So with that, allow me to cover and drop into some of the material. Now, I always check myself before I start putting ideas out in the world. And one of the ways in which I do is I actually look up the words that I'm using to make sure that I have some sound definitions. So allow me to share with you some of the definitions that I found for efficient and effective. It's actually reasonably insightful. Efficient is used to describe the ability to achieve a specific goal or task with the least amount of wasted time, effort, and resources. The least amount of wasted time, effort, and resources. It implies effectiveness in completing a task or achieving a desired outcome while minimizing inefficiencies or unnecessary steps. Well, I saw that. I said, well, wait a minute. So now I need to use the word effective to help define the word efficiency? This is becoming a little bit troubling because I thought these were kind of different things. When something is described as inefficient, it means that it does not use resources, time, or effort effectively to achieve desired results. So when I stumbled upon this, folks, I found myself thinking, well, wait a minute, maybe they're not really separate at all. Maybe they're the same thing. Well, so let's just do some more research. So I looked up the word effective, and the definition I found is the ability of someone or something to achieve the desired result. Therein lies one of the most important aspects of being effective, which is understanding what the desired result is, what the goal is, what the objective is. When something is effective, it means it successfully accomplishes its intended purpose, goal, or objective. The other thing that I found, by the way, which I thought was kind of ironic, is often associated with achieving positive outcomes or fulfilling a specific function without unnecessary waste or effort. So once again, it sort of sounds like we're talking about effective and efficient almost interchangeably. I think we are, but here's the question that I'm going to put on the table, and the one that we're going to kick around here for the next 25 minutes or so. Can one be effective without being efficient? Can one be efficient without being effective? I think the answer is yes. While they are related, they are not synonymous. For the purpose of this conversation, effectiveness is achieving the intended goal or objective, period. And efficiency is doing so in the most economic way possible, minimizing wasted time, effort, or resources. I believe that our role, our most important role as a sales engineer, a pre-sales leader, is to make sure that our teams are achieving the goal or objective and doing so with limited wasted time, effort, and resources. So what are some of the things that we can do to make that a reality? Well, we were going to talk about 5 levers that we can pull: team structure, skills development, process optimization, customer engagement, and tools and technology. As I mentioned a moment ago, actually, Chris mentioned a moment ago, I realized that was probably too much to cover, but there's some very specific areas that we're going to focus on. By the way, these aren't the only 5 levers, folks. There are probably other levers that you might be considering addressing or focusing on moving into next year. But these are 5 that came to mind for us. So what are we going to focus on? We're going to talk a little bit about team structure. We're going to talk about skills development, and then we're going to talk about tools and technology. And then I'm going to close by introducing to you something that I call the pre-sales enablement framework. It's a framework that you can use to really take inventory on the resources that you currently have and identify and prioritize the resources or the measures that you need to take moving into next year. So let's talk a little bit about team structure. Team structure. First of all, if we're going to be effective, what do we need to start with? The objectives, the goal, the purpose. So I'm going to invite you to consider, if you are thinking about restructuring the team, or if you are thinking about the team structure, what are some objectives you might consider? These may or may not be ones that you would consider, but I would encourage you to at least identify what's most important to you. What are you trying to achieve? Is it better communication and collaboration between AE and SE? Is it opportunity responsiveness? How well the team and quickly and effectively and efficiently the team is responding? Is it professional development for the team members? Is it the customer experience that you're trying to improve? Is it quota attainment? And at the end of the day, simply put, revenue and growth. At the end of the day, we are all members of the go-to-market team. At the end of the day, we're all in sales. At the end of the day, we are all responsible for revenue. I'm not here to tell you which one of these should be the objectives that you focus on. What I am going to suggest is that there are different objectives, and how you prioritize these or others may dictate how you think about structuring the team. So what are some considerations? Number 1, customer needs and market dynamics. What's happening in the marketplace? Are your customers and is their environment changing? Cultural fit and team dynamics. Team size and scalability. Do you plan to grow in the coming year? If you do plan to grow, do you have an elevation plan or a progression plan for people? How are you going to onboard? To what level? Territory coverage. Is the sales team restructuring in some way? What is the sales strategy? Is sales changing their strategy? Is product changing strategy? And as such, do you need to change the team to support that? Do you have the right skill set and expertise? Or is there a new skill set or expertise you need to bring in? And are you considering a pooled team versus a pairing team? Now, folks, we could probably spend 35 minutes in a webinar talking about any one of these things. That's not the purpose of today's conversation. The purpose of today's conversation is to put some things on the table to give you an opportunity to consider what matters most to you and to your organization. I do want to provide just a few tangible steps. First of all, as much as you can, try to define clear roles and responsibilities. If there's anything that I've learned, particularly with sales engineers, we don't like confusion. We like to understand very clearly what our roles and responsibilities. We like to understand where the boundaries are. Do that as much as you can. Number two, implement a scalable structure, particularly if you know that your team, your organization is going to be growing or going through a growth period. Involve sales leadership. This can't be done in a vacuum. And don't delay. I have to confess a sin here. I know one of the things I say is thou shalt not confess thy sins, but I have to be honest. When I was a manager, there was one point in my time as a manager where I sensed that the team structure was out of balance, but that felt like a challenge that was too hard for me to tackle, and I delayed making the tough decision. And it got to a point where I was left with no choice but to make some really difficult decisions. So don't delay, and be not afraid to make changes. If you sense that there's a misalignment there, be not afraid to make those difficult decisions. Now, usually, folks, if I were running a workshop, Chris, maybe you know this very well, usually at this point, I would pause right now and ask if there are any questions or there are any comments. We can't open the phone lines, but I will just say, are there any questions or comments that anybody cares to make in the chat? Because I'll just pause for a moment and stare at the chat and see if anybody cares to share anything. Otherwise, I'll keep moving. All right. I think that's probably enough to keep moving. Roles and responsibilities, 100%. Wendy, thank you for your comment. At the very least, I'll toss you a chip. Anybody who says anything. Oh, and one more thing. Couldn't agree more with the R&R and well. Very well said, Brian. Roles and responsibilities. One final thought. I think this is overlooked when we're thinking about our team, because we're thinking about, well, what's best for our sales engineers? What's best for the account executives? What's best for me as a leader? Don't forget to prioritize the customer. What structure or organization is going to be the best for the prospects and customers that you serve? What was your tough decision? We'd learn more about that now. So David Chalk, I'm tossing you, Chip, for the question. I'll invite you to come back to me after the fact, and I'll be happy to elaborate on. Let me put it this way. I was faced with a situation where I had to move someone into a position or else they were going to leave. And had I been more proactive, it wouldn't have been as difficult a situation. All right. Love the chat. Wendy, thanks for a comment. Shannon, you as well. Let's talk a little bit about skills development. If you saw the video, the send ahead video that I sent, I told you that I was going to introduce you to a coaching model that is literally going to change the way you think about coaching. We're going to do that in this section. But before we get there, let me again start with the objectives. If we're going to be effective, we need to make sure we understand the goal, the purpose. What are we trying to accomplish? So when we think about skills development, what might be the objectives? Professional growth and development for your team members, enhance technical expertise, improve sales skills. It might be adapting to market changes. Things are changing in the market. Our people need to change with it. Might be simply employee retention. SEs like to feel like experts. They like to be trained. They like to be kept current. This is a good way to keep your people happy. Increase revenue is a pretty obvious one. If our people are more skilled, or if they're current to the market dynamics and the industry and the technology, their skills, we are likely to increase revenue. Decrease the burden on you. I've had a lot of people, in fact, and many of you know this, I work with a lot of SE leaders. Oftentimes they'll come to me and they'll say, Chris, it just comes down. I'm just tired of feeling like I need to sit in on all their discovery calls, or I'm just tired of feeling like I need to sit in on their demos. So this is a biggie too. What are some considerations? Balancing technical and soft skills, product and technology changes. Do you know that there's a major shift? A lot of organizations I work with are going from solution sales to platform sales. That requires training. Adapting to learning styles. Some people prefer in-person, some people prefer the self-guided. We have to align with sales strategy. We need to do this, but maintain productivity. One of the complaints that I hear about enablement for SEs is it takes people out of the field. So how do we balance keeping their skills up and also keeping them out in the field? Integrating new hires. How are we going to integrate new hires if we put our people through training? Does the onboarding program keep them current? And how do we handle remote global teams? And then there's coaching versus training. Now, again, folks, I know this is a long list, and we could go deep into each one of these. That's not the purpose of this conversation. The purpose of this conversation is to give you some things to think about and which one of these resonate and strike a chord with you the most. For the moment, though, I'd like to focus on coaching versus training. We have a model, the organization that I work with, we have a model for what it means to be an SE leader. And we think there are three fundamental roles of an SE leader. What are those three fundamental roles? The first is leadership. And we believe that leadership ultimately, fundamentally drives desire. Set strategy and drives desire. The second role is management. And management fundamentally drives productivity. And the third is coaching. And coaching drives capability. It drives skills. Look, folks, I am in the business of doing sales training for sales engineers, but I know that real change doesn't happen in the workshop. Real change happens one-on-one out in the field between leader and individual contributor, between SE manager and sales engineer. It's the coaching that really drives change. So let me ask everybody a question. I'll invite you to respond in the chat. What percentage of your time do you spend leading versus managing versus coaching? Is it 20, 40, 40? Is it 20, 60, 20? Is it 10, 70, 20? Go ahead and drop it in the chat. I'm curious to hear from a few of you. What percentage of your time do you spend in leading, managing versus coaching? Haven't seen any in the chat yet. Chris, just making sure you guys can still hear me okay. Okay, there it is. I saw an answer. So that means I'm good. So there's a 20, 60, 20, 20, 60, 20, 15, 50, 35. Mike Sanders, good to see you, my friend. Toss a chip to my friend Mike. Anybody else care to share? Where would you put yourself? Shannon, 20, 70, 10. By the way, these feel like very, very transparent, very honest. Dave says 40, 40, 20. The percentage varies by week. And by the way, percentage is going to vary by week. It's probably going to vary by individual, by situation, right? 40, 30, 30, 10, 70, 20, 10, 70, 20. Fabulous, folks. Really appreciate that. And this is about what I would expect. This is, and I think the management part, look, that's sort of the foundation of our job, right? It's managing, it's tracking the number, it's managing the people, right? It's keeping people on track. Allow me to ask a second question. What would you say is the number one barrier to coaching? If the amount of time that you're coaching or the amount of energy that you're putting into coaching isn't as high as you would like it to be, what's the number one barrier to coaching? Anyone? Time. I'm tossing a chip to everyone who wrote time. That is exactly what I expected. In fact, sometimes I do polls and it's always the same thing. I just don't have enough time. If I could get myself out of dealing with all the metrics, I would spend more time coaching. Well, the model that I'm about to share with you, I believe is going to help you find more time to coach. And more importantly, I believe it's going to make the energy that you do and the time that you do put into coaching that much more effective. So let's look at this model. Before I do, we have an equation in the organization I work with. We believe that desire plus productivity plus capability equals results. These are the three levers that we have as SE leaders: leading, managing, and coaching. So let's talk about coaching in specific. I'm going to invite you, and by the way, I'm more than happy to share all these slides after the fact. But I encourage you to take notes if you care to do so. some actionable steps. What I'm going to encourage you to do is list the members of your team and assess their performance above the line, below the line, or unsure. Now, we use this same model with sales leaders and their account executives. Above the line and below the line in performance, very easy. They're either at or above quota or not. Sales engineers, it's a little bit more subjective. So however you would assess your team and rate your team individually as being above the line or below the line, or maybe you're not sure, I encourage you to do that. The second thing I'm going to encourage you to do is assess their desire to change. Now, what do I mean by their desire to change? First, is it high? Is it low? Are you unsure? Desire to change is determined based on a willingness to complete assigned developmental activities. It's measured in behavior, not attitude. What they do, there's a difference between attitude and desire. People can have the best attitude and say all the right things, but you give them something to do to develop and improve, and they don't actually do it. That indicates a lack of desire to change. Now, why is this so powerful? I'm going to introduce you to something we call the quad coaching chart. On the x-axis, we map desire, high versus low. On the y-axis, we measure results, low versus high. And therein lies 4 quadrants. I'm going to encourage you to place your team members somewhere in this chart based on how you scored them. In the upper left-hand corner, we have what we call our independents. They're above the line, they're hitting the number, they're delivering the results, don't necessarily demonstrate a desire to change. They do things their way, and that's the way it's going to be. Now, what's the problem with the independents? As the market changes, as the product changes, as things evolve, they may not stay current. Upper right-hand corner, these are the achievers. Not only are they delivering, they're always hitting the number, but they routinely demonstrate a desire to improve, a desire to get better. The lower right-hand corner, we call the strivers. They're not necessarily hitting the number. They're not necessarily quite to that performance level yet, but man, they demonstrate the desire. You give them an assignment, you make a recommendation, and they begin to instantly seek to implement it. And then the lower left-hand corner, these are the detractors. Not only are they not performing, but they're not demonstrating a desire to change. Now, this is the question, the fundamental question. Where do we typically tend to spend our time coaching? Usually it's the people below the line, not above the line. What's the problem with coaching people below the line based on performance? The detractors have demonstrated a lack of desire to change. Our coaching is wasted effort. The achievers, on the other hand, they desire improvement, yet they begin to feel ignored. Have you ever scratched your head wondering how could somebody who's so good, who's hitting the number, overperforming, leaves an organization? Because they feel ignored. I'm going to encourage you folks, coach those that demonstrate the desire to improve, the right of this model, not the bottom of this model. And for those to the left of this model, we need to lead. We need to do things that what? Drive desire. They don't need coaching. They don't even deserve our coaching right now. We need to lead them and give them and help them discover the desire. Now, some of you may be thinking, great, Chris, this sounds fantastic. How? We don't have time for that. Sorry. Let me simply say that if you're dealing with people on the left side of this equation, focus more on how can we get the desire? What's blocking them from showing and demonstrating that desire? The people on the right side, those are the people that deserve our coaching. Folks, in the interest of time, I'm going to keep marching forward. I have lost track of the chat. So Chris, I know if there was a comment or question, you'll bring that to my attention. But in the interest of time, I do want to forge ahead. There's a couple more things I want to cover. So the third thing that we're going to talk about today is tools and technology. Because the reality is really in the past 3 or 4 years, there's been an explosion of technology and tools and automation for pre-sales, which is just an amazing thing to see. And a number of organizations and leaders like yourselves are improving their organization. They're realizing new efficiencies. They're becoming more effective by implementing automation. But here's the challenge. There are lots of options out there. So how do we navigate this new uncharted water? Well, like we've done in each of the other two levers or areas that we've focused on, we're going to start with objectives. If you're thinking about automation, you're thinking about tools and technology, what are your objectives? Do you want to better manage the team, metrics, trends, insights, opportunity assignment, et cetera? Do you want to improve the process and consistency with which your teams are engaging in opportunities and with customers? Do you want to eliminate the low value activities, automate or improve RFX responses, accelerate demo and sandbox prep time? Whatever the case, there are 5 categories to consider. A gentleman named Kerry Sokolsky, I think he's on this he's one of the attendees. He runs an organization called PreSales Mastery. He and I partnered a couple of years ago to create something called the PreSales Buyer's Guide, and we came up with 5 categories. There's pre-sales oversight and management. These are really tools for SE leaders. Pre-sales opportunity execution. So these are really tools for the individual contributors. So companies like Vivint and Home Run, Pre-sales, and Proverity fall into these categories. Demo automation, RFX automation, and configuration and customization. These are the categories that Kerry and I defined for pre-sales tools. Now, I've added another one because this is now such a big deal, is the AI and machine learning and the generative AI that is now becoming so popular. For today's conversation, and again, we could spend 35 minutes on every one of these or more. For today's conversation, I'd like to focus on demo automation. Why? From my experience, from my perspective, I think companies are getting the biggest lift and the biggest bang for the buck when they're investing in demo automation. So let's talk about some of the perspectives around demo automation. For starters, what are some of the business scenarios? There are 4 very different fundamental business scenarios in which demo automation is being used. Top of the funnel guided tours, the live demo environment experience, send aheads and leave behinds, and creating trials and sandboxes. And what are the common use cases? Scaling the team. I'm sure not a manager in this audience hasn't been faced with having to, quote, do more with less. Reducing unqualified demos, reducing build times, organic stakeholder discovery. What do I mean by that? If we can send ahead or send after the fact demo assets that can be then shared with stakeholders that weren't part of the face-to-face meetings and get insight into who's looking at the demo assets and what they're looking at, we can begin to discover additional stakeholders. We improve the demo delivery consistency, and we enable product-led growth and buyer enablement, and eliminate demo infrastructure challenges. Now, those are a number of things there, folks. Again, we're not here to talk about each one of these at length. I'm going to encourage you to consider which of these strike a chord with you. Which of these could your organization most benefit from? And what are some of those benefits? Better use of SE time, a decrease in cost of sales. We mentioned product-led growth, shorter sales cycles. If people are seeing, if your prospects are seeing an introductory value-focused demo before the first meeting, they're that much more prepared to go deep. Expanding the buying team reach. Here's what we know. There are more people involved in the purchase decision than come to the meeting with the vendor. This gives us the opportunity to reach that team. We gain buyer insights. We've talked about sandbox and trial replacement. If you demo or if your demos require third-party tools, this decreases the risk. And we've mentioned buyer enablement. So what are some of the capabilities you might be considering or should consider if you're thinking about investing in demo automation? Demo screen capture, whether that's screen capture, application cloning, application overlay, video. There's a number of vendors, a number of tools in this space They, in large part, address this challenge differently. These are some things to consider. Editing demo assets. So whether it's search and replace, screen navigation, handling product upgrades. So you've created a full set of demo assets. Now the product team makes a major change. How do we go and update? How easy is it to update our demo assets? Guided tours, and then finally sharing and gating and analytics. And the analytics is arguably one of the most important aspects of demo automation. In fact, we call it demo automation. To a large degree, it's discovery automation. If we can send out some demo assets and then get an insight into what they're looking at, we are now getting insight. We are doing some discovery in an automated manner. Just a few more thoughts, folks, and then I'm going to close with that pre-sales enablement framework that I mentioned. I know we're running about 35 minutes here. Let's talk about some of the considerations you should think about if you are considering a purchase this year. What scenarios are most important to you and to your organization? Who will create and or own the demo assets? Is that going to be the responsibility of your team? Are you going to, we talked about team structure. Are you going to create a new team for that? Do you need to replicate product functionality, or will simple images do? Do your demos include third-party software? How will product upgrades impact the demo assets and the demo environments? And what analytics or insights are most important? Just like when we sell our solutions to prospects and customers, and we tell them, think through the process and think through what you're trying to achieve before throwing technology at it, we need to be doing the same thing. My opinion, it's my opinion only, by 2030, SaaS sales teams not using some sort of demo automation will have a competitive disadvantage. And by the way, 2030, that might be understated. Simply put, folks, demo automation is here and it's going to empower your teams. So we're going to wrap things up by introducing this pre-sales enablement framework. And then I think we have plenty of time to take a few questions if that's appropriate. Given all the things that we've talked about, team structure, training, coaching, automation, every SE leader I've ever worked with and spoken with says to me, Chris, I feel like I have too many things that I need to address, and it's difficult for me to prioritize. It's difficult for me to get my head around it. To that end, I created this pre-sales enablement framework. It doesn't cover everything, but in terms of enabling the team, I believe you'll find this helpful. I call this the 5 pillars of pre-sales enablement. Pillar number 1 is simply knowledge. What knowledge does your team need to have in order to be most effective? And what do I mean by that? Product knowledge, use case knowledge, technology knowledge, industry knowledge, competitive knowledge. Number 2, skill sets. What skills do they need to have to be successful? Discovery skills, presentation skills, demonstration skills, teamwork, sales acumen, emotional intelligence, objection handling. The list can go on. And by the way, these are just my thoughts. I would encourage you to think for yourself in each of these pillars. What are the items that are most important to you and your organization? Number 3 is collateral. It's the stuff, if I can use a technical term, the stuff that our teams need in order to be successful. Demo assets, demo scripts, slides, case studies, stories, scenarios, etc. Again, this is just a sample. I would encourage you to think through and come up with the list that makes sense for you and your organization. Number 4, process and tools. Rules of engagement, discovery process, demo process, POCs, CRM, pre-sales automation. We've talked about tools and technology. Again, I believe that in today's business environment, in today's software environment, pre-sales leaders, we need to be thinking about automation. And then finally, what I simply call program. So onboarding, training, coaching, assessments, roles and responsibilities, et cetera. If you complete this framework to the extent that makes sense for you, then we can use this to assess where we are. Let's call it a red, yellow, green, or a high, medium, low, what have you. But most importantly, we can identify the gaps, whether it's a knowledge gap, a collateral gap, a process gap, a tool gap, and then prioritize those gaps. We talked about being effective. This helps us identify what do we need to be effective. We talked about efficiency. This then helps us identify where do we need to focus most to be the most efficient. So with that, folks, and I know we've run about 40 minutes, probably a little bit longer than some webinars, but I'll simply close with this. Being effective and efficient means knowing the goal and eliminating waste. Decide which levers that you want to focus on. We can't focus on all of them. Remember the equation: desire plus productivity plus capability equals results. It requires us to lead, manage, and coach. And I'll encourage you to leverage the quad coaching chart to both increase the effectiveness and efficiency of your coaching. Consider technology options. The demo automation is here to stay. And I think it's time we get on board and take inventory and prioritize. I hope you find which, by the way, the pre-sales enablement framework, of course, I'm happy to share with anybody. And with that, I want to simply say thank you, Reprise, thank you, Pre-Sales Collective, and of course, my organization's Tech Sales Advisors, and I appreciate having this opportunity. So, Chris Mabry, I think I'm handing it back to you. Is that correct, sir?
You got it. Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. Huge thank yous in the chat. And I feel like every time I connect with you, I learn something new. I wrote everything down. So I really appreciate it. I also couldn't help but think my question to you would be around customer consideration on the consideration of your products, right? So if you're thinking of demo automation or tooling or how to scale a team, it's all about like, well, what does my customer want? Do they want to spend 60 minutes with an SE?
Yeah.
Do they want to, like at what point do they want that time with my team?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I have so many.
I mean, look, and Chris, you're familiar with a philosophy that we have called other-centered selling. I think the more we can put the customer, the people that we serve, and notice the word I'm using, folks, not the people we sell to, the people we serve, the organizations we serve. The more we can put them at the center of every decision that we're making. Look, not only are we going to be more successful as an organization, we're going to be more satisfied doing so. So
that's right. And there's actually one question. We have a few minutes for Brian. I love this question because I'm just a huge advocate for the transition from IC to leadership. His question is, what's the best way to help a manager, director, or leader in the process? So we've unpacked a lot, but how does an IC step up and say, I'm here to not only contribute, but help you in your goal?
I mean, to be fair, Chris, there's probably 30 or 40 people more well qualified than me to answer that question. But I'll just share the first thing that comes to mind for me, and that is we're not in all the trenches. We don't see and hear everything that's going on. I think one of the biggest mistakes that ICs can make as a sales engineer, one of the biggest things you can make is to just assume that your manager knows everything that's going on and hears everything that's being said, and is just deciding not to do something about it, right? Or ignoring it. So if you see an opportunity to improve, or if you sense that maybe there's a better way, be not afraid to bring it to your manager's attention. And because he or she may not know, they may not be aware. So that's the first thing that comes to mind for me, Chris.
Yeah. And to tack on that, pointing out problems is easy, but pointing out a problem with a desired resolution or a valuable resolution is
Yes.
is what really makes leaders. So
Yeah.
go to your leader with a problem, but have a very, have at least a suggestion on solving.
And by the way, Chris, you triggered another thought. So that fabulous add on to what I said. Yes, don't just bring the problem, bring a suggestion. The other thought that comes to mind immediately after this is ideas are only worth the words they're spoken with. It's action. Action speaks louder than words. And you and I are working on something on the side, and you probably know what it is that I'm referring to. And I had to take an idea to my colleagues, and literally what was told to me was, Chris, great idea, but I hear great ideas every week. So go execute. You have my blessing, but go execute. So the, don't bring just the idea, but execute.
That's right. Okay, well, thank you everybody so much. Really appreciate your time. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, Chris. I look forward to many more of these. Have a great rest of your day. And I guess my last takeaway is just reach out to us, connect with Chris on LinkedIn, reach
Please,
out,
yeah.
ask your questions, any follow-ups. We're very open to that. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Fabulous.
Take care.